Hey, it's Sandra from Inspired Keyboardist. Thanks so much for tuning in. In today's video, I'm going to share 5 worship music director tips, and in the next video it's going to be the next 5, so in total I have 10 tips. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about what a music director is. So for larger churches where you have lots of band members and maybe the band is spread out very far on the stage, you might need a music director to speak into a microphone that is only connected to such that only the band members can hear it on their in-ear monitors. So you can speak, they'll hear your voice, and you can direct them while the music is going on. So this is great if your church has this kind of facility and it's really, really cool. If your church doesn't have this kind of facility, it's fine as well. You could probably direct them through hand signs or by taking the lead and playing your own instrument, and then they can listen and follow, although it's going to be harder if they can't even hear your voice. So I am going to share with you what I learned from leading as a music director for quite a few times now, and let's get right into it. So tip number 1 is that your leadership actually begins before the whole rehearsal. What I did was I took quite a few hours to just analyze the songs. I actually went into every detail based on the recording that we're supposed to reference, and I wrote in the chord sheets not just the typical information like the lyrics and the chords, but I also wrote in band dynamics, how many times we do what, and if we did the verse 4 times, what were the different band dynamics featured in the 4 times. So every single verse, I describe exactly what happened. So for example, verse 1, only the keyboards, and then verse 2, the bass comes in with a drum, with a groove, and I give every detail. The idea is not to glue our eyes onto the very detailed chord sheet, but in the event we ever need to reference, because sometimes you are in the middle of rehearsal and you just don't remember, even if you thought you did. It's very quick and convenient to just reference the very detailed chord sheet and just jump right into it and say, oh yeah, the second time this is what happens. I've been to a few rehearsals where people actually just say, oh, okay, let's see, we forgot what happened. Let's open up Spotify on our phones and just play it into the microphone. And not cool, just because I think rehearsal time is really precious. Every minute really counts. And if you have the chord sheets, you've already done your homework, every detail has been captured in the chord sheet, it's so much faster going into it and looking for the details of what happens when you are trying to reference a song, as opposed to listening to it on the recording and then having to scroll to the right part of the music, and it's altogether just not very professional for me. So if you can, as a music director, take at least an hour and listen very carefully to every detail. It's actually really easy to sort of skip out some details, like exactly how many times we repeat this chord progression. So I will really suggest that a lot of the homework happens before the worship rehearsal. So go ahead, listen carefully to every detail as much as you can and write it down on the chord sheets, so that during the rehearsals, if you ever need to reference to it, if ever any band member needs your guidance on when they come in, you're all set to give them the directions. And of course, the fastest way to get a rehearsal going is to play as much like the recording as possible. It's always when we try to deviate from the original recording, let's do something different, and that's when the rehearsal might get a whole lot longer, because everyone's trying to do different things and you're experimenting. So here's a tip, if you really want to try and save time, you don't have a lot of time for rehearsal, then I will highly suggest that you guys keep to what's in the recording that you guys are referencing. So that's the first tip. The second tip is that as a music director, your job is to make sure you prepare the band in advance for what's the next section when you guys are playing. So this is like a typical kind of a role, really, because you get to speak into the microphone, and while you guys are playing, maybe you're playing the verse and you're getting them ready to go into pre-chorus. Remember to fulfill your role, to actually say in good time, not like 3 seconds before, but sort of when you're halfway through the verse, you want to actually say into the microphone, pre-chorus next, guys, pre-chorus. So at least people can hear you and then they can get themselves ready, whatever it is they need to do with their instruments to prepare for the pre-chorus, which is the next section. I say this because it sounds very duh, of course we gotta do it, but it's also easy to forget. Sometimes we ourselves are engrossed in our own instruments and then we forget that we're actually supposed to lead. So not just calling out the next section, but calling it out in good time. So people actually have time to prepare, just in case they forget, especially if it's like a different special section that's deviates from the recording. So I think that's a really helpful thing to do. So the third tip is I highly suggest bringing pen and paper. So even if you don't have chord sheets for some reason, you want to just make sure you've got just physical notebook or paper to write on, because sometimes during rehearsals things go really quickly and you really need to just quickly jot down stuff. So yeah, my own chord sheets were a lot of mess because my handwriting is not wonderful and I find myself having to scribble notes down really quick. But yeah, I find that if you don't have a pen and paper, after rehearsal, it's so easy to jumble all the information up. Even if it's just 5 songs, you might go like, oh dear, which one is the one where we have to do bridge for 4 times? Is it song number 2 or 3? And it's so easy to mix things up. When you have pen and paper, you can just write things down quickly and capture information. And when you go back after the worship rehearsal, you can actually look back and go like, yes, it's for this song number 2. So I think it's just a great and easy way to minimize any form of yeah, remembering things wrongly from worship rehearsal, basically, because there's so much information. So tip number 4 is that when you're playing an instrument and you're also leading, I just find that our brains can't really multitask that much. So if you used to play a lot on your instrument, you might need to pull back that much more and play a whole lot less. So here's an example. I'm a keyboardist, and I might lapse into playing synth lines along with a pad. When I was music directing, I told myself, let's keep it simple. Let's just do pads. No synth lines. I'm not going to do any fancy thing that goes on that's really loud, because I find that when I'm doing those lead lines, synth lines, or even just piano riffs, I find that I've got to take up that much more CPU in my own brain, and then I may not be able to lead so well. And if I don't lead well, it might be more disastrous than the music sounding good. And then, you know, so I just find that I want to just simplify my own jobs. And so even if I'm playing in the band, I told the other keyboardists that, hey, go ahead and do more, do all the running motifs, and yeah, embellish stuff. I'm just gonna hold on to the pad. So if you're like a guitarist or something, you could just do simple stuff. You don't have to do too much fancy, complicated stuff in order to think about the music, and because you're always thinking, okay, what's next? And you're preparing the band, and you need that amount of brain space to think about that. So tip number 5, the last one for this video, is that it's helpful if you've come back from rehearsal and you're just looking through your notes, and maybe you can just consolidate all the stuff that the band needs to work on. So maybe you remember that during rehearsal, the electric guitarist needs to listen to song number 3 a lot more to find out how to play the introduction correctly. So you might want to send a text to the electric guitarist and say, hey, it'd be great if, yeah, let's remember that maybe you can just listen to the song number 3 introduction quite a few times before we meet together on Sunday. Yeah, consolidate a list like that and then form a chat group or something. I did that, and I just reminded everybody their little bits, and then I left it at that. So at least it's a form of consolidating what they need to do, and that we all have some form of homework to make ourselves musically the most prepared we can be leading up to Sunday. So there we go, 5 tips, the first 5 of 10 tips. Stay tuned for the next video, which will have tips 6 to 10. And thanks a lot for watching this video. If you found it helpful, it would be so awesome if you could just click the thumbs up below so I can get some feedback if this was helpful. And also, if you would like worship keyboard tips and resources, I've got a whole treasure trove of them. Just click the link below, sign up for my email list, and you can access all of them for free. So I'll see you in the next video, and take care.